Treasurer Josh Frydenberg joins us now from Canberra. Treasurer, good morning. How concerned are you based on all of that? It was a great headline figure, but concerned are you that the jobless rate will jump this current month and months into the future?
Well, Michael, you're absolutely right. That headline number of 4.6%, while it's the lowest in 12 years, does not tell the full story. But what it does tell is a story of what is happening in New South Wales, where the hours worked fell by 7% in the month as the survey period took into account the second and the third week of the lockdown in New South Wales. Whereas with Victoria was emerging out of the lockdown during that period, and we saw a 9.7% increase in hours worked, which does indicate that the economy can rebound very strongly once restrictions are eased, and obviously that is what we're shooting for with the 70% and 80% vaccination targets. They're going to be critical that we reach, and obviously people are getting the vaccination in increased numbers every single day.
You've said you expect the economy to contract by 2% this quarter. But the Prime Minister believes in miracles. It'll be a miracle, won't it, if Australia avoids another recession by the end of the year?
Well, look, in terms of September, everything that's been put to me is that the economy will contract by at least 2%. But we're only halfway through that September quarter, and we do know that the economy is remarkably resilient. I mean, that's underlined in yesterday's numbers, but it's also underlined by the fact that both businesses and households have accumulated some $290 billion on their household and business balance sheets compared to the start of the pandemic last year. That is money that will be spent as restrictions are eased, and we also know from the banks that the level of hardship and distress is not as acute as what they saw this time last year across the economy. So we're very hopeful and confident that with those Doherty Institute numbers we can reach that 70 and 80% target, and that will allow restrictions to be eased.
All focus is on New South Wales again. The New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian is insisting on offering freedoms, as yet undisclosed freedoms, to vaccinated people in her state from about a week and a half's time, when the fully vaccinated figure will be roughly only about 35% or so. Is that advisable in your view?
Well, we've made very clear that they need to take this lockdown very seriously and that it's very important that the lockdown is effective to reduce the number of cases. Decisions as to particular restrictions that they ease will be matters for their own public health authorities, but we do know how dangerous, deadly, contagious this particular strain of COVID is, and that is why we implore not just the New South Wales government but other governments to do what they can to get on top of these outbreaks. As you know, the Victorian lockdown's been extended for another 2 weeks. That's pretty tough on people in Victoria, now in lockdown for more than 200 days. But yesterday we announced, in partnership with the Victorian government, a further $807 million for small and medium-sized businesses to help get them through this crisis.
Do you have complete faith in the way Gladys Berejiklian is handling the outbreak in New South Wales?
I'm confident she's taking the medical advice. I'm confident she and her government are doing what is necessary in very difficult circumstances. No one's perfect, but what is important is that progress is being made. And of course, you know, these are very challenging times, and the Delta variant cannot be eliminated. I think people have to understand that. We cannot go for elimination. What we are seeking to do right now is to suppress the virus and at the same time to boost the vaccination numbers. 215 doses being delivered every minute over the last 24 hours. That's quite a remarkable number, and it shows that the hesitancy out there, Michael, with respect to the AstraZeneca vaccine in particular, is reducing because more than 40% of those vaccines that were delivered yesterday were actually AstraZeneca vaccines, and nearly half of those were people under the age of 60. So that is encouraging for the future.
It is fantastic to see hesitancy coming down. The New South Wales Premier is very keen on shifting the conversation to living with COVID once we hit the 70 and 80% threshold. But based on the current reproduction rate in New South Wales, and based on the Premier saying she believes the current settings are fine, there'll be no tougher restrictions, we could be talking about case numbers in the thousands in New South Wales, even though we hit 70% in October or November. Would you be comfortable with New South Wales opening up with case numbers that high?
Again, you're asking me to put myself in the position of those public health officials who have all the data and all the information.
But you've heard health advice for the last 18 months. You're one of the senior figures in the Morrison government. Do you believe that is a safe course of action?
Well, I do. My point is that they need to seriously focus on suppressing the virus, taking the necessary action to do so, and to get those numbers down, not up, to get those numbers down. But as we've seen here in Victoria, it's really difficult to do, even when you have extended lockdown. So everything needs to be
New South
thrown
Wales
at this challenge.
Take more. You're keen on getting the numbers down, as everybody is, obviously, especially our New South Wales viewers, which is like to see tougher suppression action even before we get to those vaccination targets by the New South Wales government.
Well, Michael, the individual measures will be up to their health authorities and to that government. They are responsible for those public health orders in their state, but they need to take the necessary action in order to suppress the virus, because once it gets out, as we've seen, you get hundreds of cases, you get hospitalisations, you get deaths. But once we get to that 70 and 80% vaccination rate, the transmissibility of the virus reduces, the number of people getting the serious illness reduces, and in the words of the Doherty Institute, stringent lockdowns become unlikely. That's why we have to provide hope for the future. That's why states can't expect that the Commonwealth's emergency economic support will continue at the scale it is right now, because we have to give people hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. People are rolling up their sleeves, they're getting the jabs in record numbers, and they're doing so not just to protect their own family, they're doing so because they want to protect their own job and they want the economy to come back, and that's what we have to commit, premiers, chief ministers, prime minister, and all of us, to do so.
And we all live for the day when lockdowns will be nothing but a very, very bad memory. Treasurer, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, let's check.